Hello and welcome to the Warhammer Podcast, episode 126. I'm your host, Brad. This is my co-host, Eric.
How's it going?
And today, we're going to be doing something over there. This is the Distraction Carnifex. Remember when that was going to be our name?
Yeah, I hate it now.
Warhammer Podcast was a much, much better naming.
Yes.
Distraction Carnifex is available, though, if you would like a name for your failing Warhammer podcast.
I would not suggest going with that one.
This just in, the Kieran Show is rebranding.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's very obviously clear what we're going to be talking about in this episode.
Smash Captains?
Sounds good.
All right, you were worried about the Distraction Carnifex episode, but it was a distraction. We're here for news.
Yeah, it is that time of news, and this one's very exciting.
Yes, Horde Mode 1.0. I know I promised at the end of last week's episode that it would be this week. It's next week. Right now, as I say these words to you, you could go onto the Horde Mode Discord, link in the show notes or pinned comment on YouTube, and you could join many other people in helping test Horde Mode 1.0 before it goes live 7 days after this episode is posted.
Yeah, pretty excited for this episode.
I've put several dozen hours of my life into the 1.0 update, so please help us make it look good if you have the time.
Yeah, definitely take a look and give feedback, and I mean, it's also just, you get a sneak preview, so...
True. You can see how incomplete certain parts of it are. I mean, they're totally ready. I worked hard all weekend. I didn't play the Path of Exile League Start.
No.
It went wonderful, I'm sure.
But yeah, absolutely. Next week, we're doing Horde Mode 1.0. It will happen. Hype.
And as a second piece of news, did you like the idea of the cereal episode?
I've seen it come up a couple times, so I know that there's at least a couple people have some interest in it.
Well, if you have interest in it, it is literally time to put your money where your mouth is. The Patron poll is up as this episode goes live, or I screwed up. And in the Patron poll, you will find that one of the options is the which cereal each faction is. So if you would like to see us have to record that topic, you could force us to do that.
I mean, there's other options as well. You could always choose some of the other options. That's not the only one.
What if I make all the other options like really boring lectures?
You could put in one that's like me talking stats and science and stuff like that of like
the history of long molecule plastics.
Yeah, right.
Like you either have to sit through a chem class from college. You better hope the vote goes the way you want.
I mean, there is potential for greatness.
All right, that's all the news we've got for this week. We can actually go into the topic proper by our merch.
All right, and the topic actually is Distraction Carnifex.
It'd be really funny if this was just a 30-hour ad read or something.
And we just keep teasing like a distraction. It's like, when's the thing gonna happen? I don't know. Look over here. Look over there.
They've done 13 ad reads for Ball Washers Anonymous, and they still haven't talked about a single Distraction Carnifex.
And then I'm just thinking of like, we wouldn't get paid for any of it. We would just have fucking random ass reads and they'd be like, no, bro, that's not a real video.
Sorry, guys, but we accepted every one of those requests for a collab and ad read in our inbox. There was 186. Strap in. This episode's gonna make us a fortune.
Yeah. That's actually kind of funny to think of, but no, Distraction Carnifexes.
You can tell it's a distraction because we keep getting distracted and can't start this topic.
It's doing its job very, very well.
All right, so Eric, what is a Distraction Carnifex?
Well, it's a Carnifex that acts as a distraction. Mind blown. But a key part of being a distraction is being noticeable. So it's nice to be big and bonus of also scary.
There's a joke in here about how I'm a Distraction Carnifex on the show.
Nah, you're a lovable teddy bear.
Big, scary, distracting. I don't know if I'm tough, but like going by the Nurgle rule, I'm fat and therefore yes.
It's not just strict toughness, it's tankiness. So like, you know, you could take a couple hits kind of thing. Let the fat jiggle around and absorb it.
Do the Homer Simpson test.
Oh no.
How many times when you slap your belly does it shake around?
It never stops.
Discovered perpetual motion.
So yeah, obviously, since this is a distraction, it's probably going to be drawing a bunch of fire. That's where your opponent's going to be shooting. So having good toughness and tankiness to actually survive at least some of it, it's huge bonus, kind of necessary. It's nice if it can also do damage if it manages to live long enough, but realistically, if it's done its job, it's drawn all the fire and probably died.
Yeah, it's psychological warfare 101. Shove something up, dead center, make them pay attention to that, and then win with all the things they didn't pay attention to.
Yeah, there's not much finesse with the actual distraction. You're not trying to do anything. It's just the basic football play of take the ball and run up the center. So it's nice to have decent movement so that like the distraction is in front of the things that you don't want them to see. It'd be real weird if it's got like 4 movement.
Yeah, and another thing is to make it not be a huge loss when it dies. So being low in points is good.
Definitely. So like there's a certain balance between, you know, having like the big, scary, tanky, decent movement and actually being like the hero Death Star, all your points are in it kind of thing. You don't want that.
That's a different concept that we could cover in a different episode, but the Death Star, Death Ball, whatever you want to call it, is a strategy that is not related to the Distraction Carnifex. The Distraction Carnifex is specifically the opposite. What you're shoving up is a paper tiger, and then you're winning based on doing stuff with the rest of your army. The Death Star idea is putting a bunch of buffs into one legendary, amazing unit that is like super efficient and using that to delete stuff.
Right. There is a balance. Like sometimes the Carnifex is so fucking pushed that like it does the damage anyways that you would expect. It's just super low point cost and everything. But like in a more balanced meta or a game, you want low points, have some damage, sure, as like a threat so that they actually think it's scary, but it's not all eggs in that basket kind of thing. I'm a big fan of the psychological warfare of just like pointing out like, hey, my Carnifex is scary. It's going to eat your Marine.
For when you're playing against your like 9-year-old nephew.
Well, I mean, I'm playing against Space Marines, so...
You got me with the Space Marine jab.
So you're running straight up the center, and then all the rest of your army is kind of holding back a little bit, or, you know, they're going on the flanks, they're doing objective control, they're preparing for the perfect charges at a certain, you know, like 2 turns from now, I'm going to be in like the perfect position to be able to charge your artillery, or, you know, whatever it is. The rest of the army is going to be doing some finesse, but there's a certain aspect of don't overthink it, because then all that fancy movement could draw attention away from the Distraction Carnifex, you know? So let it do its job.
Okay, so we've mentioned the general idea of what a Distraction Carnifex is. Let's look at the prime example, which is the Carnifex, though its use as a distraction piece has varied over the editions.
There's definitely been some times that it's not really a distraction.
Yeah, sometimes it's garbage and weak, so it's not a distraction because it's not worth dealing with. Sometimes it's pushed, but it's very expensive, and therefore it's changed role and is no longer distraction worthy and it's just a main threat. I think we're in a pretty decent spot for it to play a Distraction Carnifex role.
Yeah, right now, 1 is 125 points, 2 for 250, and it's still got solid movement, and toughness could be a bit better, but like T9, 2-up save, 8 wounds, that's pretty tanky.
I don't know if it's the best Distraction Carnifex currently in Tyranids. It might be.
I think it's debatable. We'll probably talk about another one that could also be debatable in Tyranids, but of note, the Carnifex does have a bunch of ranged and melee options that like can still threaten.
It's an old dread. It has a billion options. Importantly, though, it does not have the old dread little leg problem. It actually moves 8,
which is very necessary.
When it's something that doesn't have like good mobility like fly or any weird tricks or anything, I would say 8 is kind of the minimum of what we're looking for here. More if you have a big base.
And it also does kind of depend on the army that's playing it. You know, like if you're a slower army generally, then just be faster essentially than the rest of your army. But 8's probably about right. And I mean, the model itself, it's big and scary, man. You look at it and you're like, yeah, that looks like a threat. I should probably kill it.
It has kind of gotten scope creeped, though. Like, take Jenny's Carnifex next to, like, even next to the Screamer Killer, which is essentially the same model. It's not as big as it. It looks more serious because it looks less like it belongs on the bridge on Star Trek.
I feel like the scary part does matter at a certain point, especially in, like, Tyranids.
We'll get to one that I think is really good at the scary role.
Yeah, but I see what you're saying. It definitely doesn't feel quite the same as Carnifex has in the past of just like, oh my god, that looks very scary. And that's just because like new models are getting kind of bigger and more detailed and all that stuff. But I think it still does a solid job of intimidation factor. So that's basically our gold standard that history has kind of shown us, but there's other options even in Tyranids, like you brought up in Screamer Killer. It's kind of just a variation, so side grade or whatever. But you know, there's a couple others, and other factions also have their Distraction Carnifex.
So let's take a minute then and go through a bunch of different factions and just general identities and test Distraction Carnifex. Like, is it or is it not? Pass, fail, however we want to say it. We'll do like 10, 11 examples.
All right. I guess let's start with another Tyranid model just to ease into the fact that it's not an actual literal Carnifex.
And before people scream that we skipped a faction or we chose a model that is not a Distraction Carnifex, this is not every faction's Distraction Carnifex. This is identifying what a Distraction Carnifex is, using some examples of things that are and are not one.
We'll leave every faction's Distraction Carnifex to you at home as your homework.
And then we will accept these homework assignments and then grade them on every faction's Distraction Carnifex, coming to you in 2026.
Perfect.
All right, so back to the actual topic then, Eric. Present us the one for Tyranids.
So let's take a look at the Haruspex.
It's hideous. Can we look at something else?
It definitely has the scary aspect. Good lord.
This is my wife's least favorite Tyranid model.
There's a lot of Tyranids that look nasty, but they've got this like kind of cute in a weird way. It's like, that's so nasty and weird that it's kind of cute. This doesn't. No. This is like primal fear, deep depths of the ocean, fucked up shit.
If we ever show off her army, the Haruspex in it is actually an old 3D print we found online somewhere. And it has like the Demogorgon flower face thing instead of the weird puke face.
So definitely has the scary, and it's pretty big. So we've hit the minimum bar essentially.
I would say the grasping tongue in general, just from like a basic weapon profile standpoint, is scary enough that like even looking at the datasheet, you're like, if you're doom and gloom, you look at that and go, son of a bitch, he's gonna eat my favorite character. Guaranteed he rolls perfect.
It has some damage to actually pose a threat, so it's not just ignorable. Even when you look at the datasheet, it's like, okay, ignoring emotions when I look at this thing. All right, it has some threat. Maybe I can let it distract me kind of thing. It's definitely got some solid toughness, like T11 with 14 wounds.
Even with the 3-up save, it feels a lot tankier than the Carnifex for the exact same points.
Yeah, it kind of does. It doesn't have like all the options of weapons, but the weapons that it have are enough to support the threat kind of thing.
I will say having access to different range weapons can help being the distraction, like doing suppressing fire or doing annoying fire to make them want to kill you so that you stop shooting their stuff. The grasping tongue, again, I think it pulls it off just on its own by being such the worst case is so bad for you that you like pay attention to it more than you should.
Right. Especially like if you have any characters in like the center that it's charging up, don't let it get within 12 kind of thing. Yeah, I think the Haruspex, I mean, it's 125 points, so it's pretty cheap. I think it does a good job. I would call it a Distraction Carnifex.
All right, let's go to a different Xeno. Let's do your army.
Orcs. Ghazghkull Thraka.
We're going to do this sad thing.
So there was a point in time where Ghazghkull Thraka was like a Primarch and obviously was not a Distraction Carnifex because it would just destroy an entire army.
There was a point in time where I don't think you could deal more than 3 wounds to him in an entire turn. Not phase, the whole turn.
He was very, very scary. Still able to put some damage out. He's not nothing, but
defensively,
it's weird, but actually pretty tanky just because, like, okay, T6, but Makari being there and having the 2-up invuln.
Yeah, he's essentially just having Gaz at 11 wounds and equipped with the Phantom Generator or whatever.
Yeah, which essentially 11 wounds is pretty solid. He still has a 2-up save and a 4-up invuln, like, naturally. So not super tanky just because, like, T6 is still T6. But
T6 on Gaz feels so insulting.
It does. But, like, it's still gonna be able to take some fire. You know, it's not just gonna be like, oh, we tossed a couple bolters his way, now he's dead. It's definitely on the lower end of what you'd want for tankiness, though.
How about movement, though? Could you consider this the lower end?
This is a 5-inch movement.
I know she lied to you in high school, but 5 inches is not enough.
No, not for run up the center of the board being a distraction. The rest of your army is right in line with you. It's not really working. 235 points is not super expensive, but like...
It's the high end of what I'm looking for in a Distraction Carnifex. I don't really want to go much over like 10-12% of my list.
Yeah, I feel like 200 is where you start like, okay, what are we actually getting out of it? Does it have more ability than just being only a Distraction Carnifex? Like, if certain matchups require it, can it do something else? Can it snipe a character or whatever it is?
Here's my problem. Gaz is going to be leading a unit. If he's leading a unit, at what point is it just a Death Star?
It absolutely is, because they're absolutely not cheap. They're mega knobs, so like minimum 80 points in addition, and like you're probably taking a full squad for 240. Now you're at a quarter of your list.
Yeah.
It's going to be scary, but like it's not a distraction anymore.
No, we are well outside of what a Distraction Carnifex is.
Gaz does do the big and scary thing, though.
If you don't look at the T6.
Yeah, I don't think we can call Gaz a Distraction Carnifex.
All right, let's go to something that I think comes a lot closer, and to me is not a bad example. We have the Talos.
We're on to one of your armies, and an army that likely wouldn't be thought of very often as having a Carnifex.
I actually think Drukhari is one of the better examples of being able to pull off using a Distraction Carnifex. Part of my reason for this is the army is not tanky. The army likes to die.
T3 doesn't help.
So generally, having something to distract your opponent and get them to shoot into something tough while you blast away with dark lances from a bunch of frail little boys and girls. I actually think this is an army that is looking for a Distraction Carnifex. So the Talos and the Kronos, you could make arguments for either, but I'm going to do the Talos. 7-inch move, it's fine. It's low.
It's low for the army as well, because like you've got the boats. So like we're not in a great spot, but it'll potentially be okay.
It's got fly. Remember when that was super useful?
There were editions where having fly 7 inches was like, yeah, okay, that's solid. But
so he's only T7, as much as I just made fun of Gaz's T6. However, this is where things are going to get a little different. 3-up save, 6-up invuln, 5-up feel no pain. And I'm going to say it's only got 7 wounds to take 1, which is 80 points. So we have 14 wounds of 3-up, 6-up with a 5-up feel no pain for 160 points. This is where I think we're just at. This is a Distraction Carnifex. You can put some, decent shooting on it. If you tie it up in melee, it can hit pretty well. The Talos in general is doing everything a Distraction Carnifex should do. I'm going to say it's on the low end of it, but it's also on the cheap end of it.
And I think you brought up a great point of the Talos in Drukhari is a great Distraction Carnifex. And that matters. Like, if you were going to put the Talos in an army like Custodes, it would be laughable as a Distraction Carnifex. It would be pathetic.
It's just a custodian.
Yeah. So, like, the army that you're playing has its own scale. The Talos does a great job for Drukhari, and I agree. Seems like a Distraction Carnifex to me.
Eric, why is the next one on here?
Well, tell me about the Monolith.
You cannot sell me on this. All right, let me start off with the problem, Eric. The Monolith is 375 points. Why is it on here?
Well, I mean, I have seen some talk, Reddit and stuff like that, about, the Monolith being used as a distraction, essentially.
I get what you're saying. I feel like we're at Distraction Night.
Yeah.
There are different forms of distractions, but it is not a Distraction Carnifex.
Right.
This is an expensive model. If you're using 400 points of your army as a distraction, you played yourself.
I mean, there are cases of going more wide on Necrons with trash infantry units and being like, all right, here's the Monolith in the center. You gonna deal with it? While everything else is garbage that just does objective control. And I think that that's where people are like, oh, that's my Distraction Carnifex.
And that's a fair take. Like, I've watched people play Hypercrypt. I don't own a Monolith yet. That can be read as a threat, Eric.
No, I mean, it's perfectly great terrain.
But I understand where they're coming from of, like, the combo potential it represents is a distraction, but, like, it is a lot of points of your army, whatever you're doing with your Monolith.
Yeah, 375 is just too much. Like 300 and you're already at like, that's not really a distraction. That's a lot of your list.
That's an investment.
Yeah, 375. I mean, it's got decent movement. It's tough. It's got a lot of wounds, decent save. Everything's there. It's just we're on close to night territory, which is not a distraction. There are ways to play it that it could fulfill the role in certain lists, but in general, I agree with you. The Monolith is not a distraction Carnifex.
I will say, though, behind the scenes, Eric set me up to hate this more because he used the old Monolith model because he knows the new one actually looks pretty good and he doesn't like admitting that fact.
I will never admit that fact.
It's pretty cool looking, though.
It's not scary, though.
It is not. It is a pyramid. For your own protection, stay away from Egypt if the Monolith is scary to you.
That's pretty true. But let's move on.
All right, this one actually is very acceptable. We have the Wraithlord, which generally represents what I consider most yeses to be. It is the Dreadnought-ish, the Dreadnoughts.
Yeah, we did that before.
We've done that joke.
It's a clear little fun pun. But yeah, it's tough to say it's scary.
It's a dumb model, but it's a fun dumb model, but it's not scary.
In the rest of the army that's deployed out, oh yeah, that's kind of making scary, sort of, in relation to the rest of it. But yeah, no. It moves 8.
It hits our move. It's got a good toughness at 11. It's got a good save at 2. It can be equipped with all sorts of distraction gear. 10 wounds is fine. It is within the realm of a Distraction Carnifex. Point-wise, 145. Very reasonable.
Yeah, it's right in the accepted ranges. I think 8 feels a little slow for this particular army, but given the fact that it has so many ranged options that, like, you can just be annoying with those and, like, draw hate towards it, means that, like, okay, even if it's not really outpacing some of the rest of your army, it's being annoying enough that it's like, all right, that's the focus, kill it dead kind of thing.
Yeah, like a pair of Wraithlords running around is enough to, like, properly screw up your game plan enough that you have to pay attention to them, and then they can just sit back with their tanks and lay into you with, like, fire prisms and stuff, or whatever the current broken tank of choice is for Eldar.
That's about right, yeah.
Pick by edition and current nerfs.
So, yeah, I mean, I think the Wraithlord is a Distraction Carnifex. I think that there are certain lists that you run them and it's not a Distraction Carnifex. You're using it, tactically with the rest of your army. And
that's absolutely possible with most Distraction Carnifexes. It is not like a joke against the model. Many of these could just have a list built around them and be used normally. The Distraction Carnifex is a way to play the model,
which is always nice to have as an option.
All right, this one's a good sanity check.
Yeah, let's talk about Nurglings.
10 out of 10 for the distraction portion. 0 out of 10 for the Carnifex portion.
Yeah, the whole, like, you don't really need to have a huge damage profile because, like, you're just trying to be distracting and get shot. You have to have a bar of threat kind of thing.
Nurglings are an entirely different, very valid tactical choice. They have nothing to do with what a Distraction Carnifex is. They are distractions. Being an infiltrator unit means that they can start the game on midfield, being obnoxious, getting in the way. Commandos have had similar experiences in the past in my games.
It's basically just disrupt your opponent's battle plan from deployment.
Yeah, the turn 1 will not go the way you want unit.
Yeah, which is very distracting when done properly. And Nurglings are super annoying because they cost nothing. So like putting any amount of fire into it is like, wow, this is dumb. But it does do that distraction.
They have essentially no save. It's just a 6-up invuln, right? But they are 12 wounds of trash that you have to eat through so that they don't tie your units up in combat.
And like T3 movement is only 5, but you have infiltrators. So like it has a lot of the distraction part. It does that job pretty well. It has none of the Carnifex part. So no, Nurglings, you are not a Distraction Carnifex.
But it's a great showing of an extreme example of something that could be mistaken for a Distraction Carnifex, even though it is a different type of unit that I don't think has a cool name yet.
Speed Bump?
Yeah, Speed Bump is the classic, but Speed Bump is boring.
It is boring, but like I don't know of anything else that it's called. So I mean, comments below if you have your fan favorite.
All right, Eric, enough shilling to the audience. You're terrible at it.
I am terrible at it.
You know what else you're terrible at?
Many things. One of them being actually painting. Yes.
Yes, you are terrible at painting.
Is that not leading into the just blanket statement? Fuck you, Eric.
We're just here to talk about your skills.
Wonderful.
I figured you were having too good of a week. It has nothing to do with the next thing in this list being a Baneblade, the thing that Eric famously has been sandbagging painting for 18 months. A 4-hour-long project, most likely.
I've already put more than 4 hours into it, so...
Okay, we'll say an 8-hour-long project.
Maybe.
Over 18 months.
It'll get done eventually.
There were people who wanted to see you do a speed painting challenge with those armies we bought. Imagine being so foolish.
I mean, if they don't need to get finished, I can do airbrushing pretty well. Just 3 colors, right?
Ah, the competitive Andy special. All right, Eric, explain to us why the Baneblade is not a Distraction Carnifex. It's 480 points. Okay, we can move on.
Yeah, I mean, that is basically what it comes down to. It very much is distracting. It is very big, has many guns. You want it to go away. But yeah, I mean, it just comes down to the fact that the Distraction Carnifex fundamentally is meant to be points that die while eating fire so that your other things don't. You don't want to put anything really more than 300 points. 350 would probably be like my hard cap.
I would say 250 tops.
I guess it depends on the army.
Either way, the Baneblade is not it. Stats-wise, you checked every box. It even has 1 billion guns. I believe it's the 18 guns or whatever is the meme.
I mean, I was going to say an unnecessary amount of guns, but like, I always need more DACA, so okay.
One of my favorite insults I ever saw in a random Reddit comment was someone looking at the Repulsor Executioner, and their comment was, "That is an inelegant amount of guns." Which is something that has always stuck with me when looking at Imperium vehicles. That is an inelegant number of guns.
Now, that is funny. But if we're going to be talking about tanks, I think we should actually look at the Dorn.
All right, so if the Dorn is what you were trying to hide from me, this is a much better pick in my opinion. So, move 10, toughness 12, save 2 up, 18 fucking wounds, dear God.
I did not actually understand that many wounds either until I looked at it and I was like, holy shit. All right.
It has an inelegant number of guns.
Yeah, which honestly, there's a certain like scariness of that many guns just staring you down, even if there's like other tanks. But point cost. I mean, that's where we failed the Baneblade.
It does come just under my hard cap. 250 is what I said, so 240 makes it. It's the high end of what I want to see, but it's there. And it has high stats in every category I care about for this.
Yeah, and I feel like because it's Astra Militarum, we can go a little bit higher because they have enough cheap infantry that they can like take advantage of, you know, spend a little bit more points on your Distraction Carnifex while the infantry go do objective controls and are completely ignored.
Or just a pile of Leman Russes in the back.
That is true.
Sacrifice your one Dorn, putting it somewhere stupid so they focus on it while getting blasted by a bunch of Russes.
It is tough to distract from any tanks, but I think the Dorn has enough firepower that like you can basically get the emotional, like you can put the Dorn in a bad spot and just hit a few key units annoying it, and like they're going to be emotionally invested in killing the Dorn no matter what it takes. So yeah, you can probably still distract even from backline tanks in your own army. I think the Dorn is a great Distraction Carnifex.
All right, let's just go through a couple more Imperium ones real quick. I like the next one. This is a spicier one. So Saint Celestine.
This one's weird.
It is, isn't it?
I mean, it's a pretty big model. Like, you're going to notice it in the army.
It's T3.
It's T3. It's fucking ridiculous. But, I mean, it's got a 2-up save with a 4-up invuln, and it has the Gemini Superior. So it's got 2 other models.
Yeah, so 9 total wounds. 2 up, 4 up. T3.
I mean, it also has like a way to like come back. It's T3, but all of the shenanigans of surviving through fire kind of make it tanky in a weird, annoying way.
Yes, it reminds me of Gaz, but it doesn't have the horrible 5-inch move.
Yeah, 12 inches. Let's go.
You can make it lead stuff, but like, doesn't have to.
No, they're also just gonna basically, if you put them together, they would be a better trade piece. Then you're spending too much points to be a Distraction Carnifex. So like, I'm not sure the whole leader thing matters for this aspect. But for the army, Saint Celestine is quite tanky just because of how it's going to play. And it's doing so in an annoying way. It's similar to like the Catons of like, I fucking hate that thing so much. I want it dead. I don't care what it's going to take. I will kill it before this is done.
If you know how bad Eric is at acting at any point where we have to like shill or anything like that, and he seems so uncomfortable, and that was the most visceral, emotional sentence he has said in 3 days.
Yeah, there might have been 1 or 2 cases of Catons. So it's tough, man. 160 points. I think it's solid option for the army. It does have the potential of being a Distraction Carnifex. I just wonder if the army cares.
It is a very frail army.
It's a very trade-oriented, like, yeah, it's frail, but like, hopefully you killed the thing that was point for point more, so you're getting better on that trade, essentially. And that can still work with a Distraction Carnifex. It's a weird play pattern.
Yeah, I'll give it a tentative yes, but the T3 is so weird to say yes to.
It's really.
It is only because Miraculous Intervention, when your opponent is using this as a Distraction Carnifex, it will always work. If you try doing this,
that's true.
You will roll a 1, and this will be a great waste of 160 points.
Yeah, but like, if you put all of your firepower into just getting rid of it, it is coming back. So, an interesting one. But let's move on to one that I would actually really like to hear your thoughts on. This is AdMech.
I have very complicated feelings about this unit. We're looking at the Kastellan Robots.
I think they do a good job of being intimidating given the army. They're definitely going to draw the eye of like, hey, what's that thing?
They're definitely the part of the army that you keep looking at and going, these are so cool. Why are they alone? Look at these sick robots.
Wouldn't that be wild if there were more of this?
10,000 years ago, there were.
Movement 6, all right, not great.
Movement 6 is not great. No, it is a clear problem here. But then we get to like their T9. They have a 2-up save and a 5-up invul because why the fuck not? A pair of them is 14 wounds.
For 190 points.
It's more than that because you're going to put your Datasmith with them. But it's under our cap. It is a unit where you can also do the 4-model mode and is no longer Distraction Carnifex. At that point, it is an investment.
Yeah. Once you hit 380 plus the Datasmith, you're at 400 and we're like, all right, no.
When there are 4 robots, this is an actual centerpiece to the army. But a pair of them as a Distraction Carnifex is pretty honestly correct. If you have at least 1 fist, you don't go double gun on them so that they can at least punch pretty well in melee.
Yeah, because honestly, it's not unreasonable to expect that they live through the initial fire, even if they are the ones being focus fired, just because T9 with a 5-up invuln, a 2-up save, 7 wounds, a pair of them, like, one of them's living through a decent amount of fire. And, like, they do have guns to plink around and be annoying.
They're weird to think of as a Distraction Carnifex, but they are absolutely a Distraction Carnifex. They don't fail any point.
No, the only thing that's, like, is the movement. But like a lot of times they're still going to be the ones moving forward while the rest of your army isn't.
It's also something that matters from a context standpoint. This is an army that can just choose to give everything assault for the turn so that they can advance to get to midboard. Then the 6-inch move isn't as much of a problem.
You know, we've brought it up a couple times, but every Distraction Carnifex is in relation to its own army.
And that's why I think the next one, as weird as it's going to sound, might actually be one.
Yeah, Land Raider then. We all love a Land Raider.
Specifically, the Land Raider with Flamers. I don't like this model. My brother owns one. He has played it against me multiple times in 10th edition, and I just don't like this model.
I don't know, man. They're all the same.
Anyway, the Land Raider with the Flamers. So we're going to come to a problem. It's got a 12-inch move. It's T12. It's got a 2-up save. It's got 16 wounds. Somehow, a Rogel Dorn still has more wounds than it.
The Rogel Dorn's cooler.
It's a much cooler model. But when you look at the size of these two models, it's a little weird. All of that said, the one that is actually super distracting, the Redeemer, is 285 points, which is over my line. We could argue, like, go with the Crusader, which has terrible guns, but again, it's just about being a distraction, and that's only 220. At which point...
I feel like the Redeemer fits in the lists better because it's got the big guns. It can do more than just transport or, be a distraction. I feel like the Crusader at 220 has enough firepower that it'll be annoying, but it's cheap enough that it also isn't a problem when it dies.
Yeah, they are transports though, which is where this gets really weird to me of like, if you're transporting something, it's just a Death Star. If it's alone, I could see you doing it like this. Get out of the transport with whatever you were transporting, have them go up to a side objective, jam this up mid, fire at a bunch of stuff, sit on the main point, and make them move you.
And I think that that's why I would grade the Crusader as a Distraction Carnifex, because it can do that. It can do you move up, disembark, they go do their own thing. You continue to be annoying and just pushing straight up the center of the board and just distract until they deal with you. And at 220 points, it did its job. It did the transport thing. And then it continued to draw fire and leave whatever you transported alone, kind of thing.
Yeah. And honestly, I will also give it to the vanilla Land Raider too, because 4 las cannons is enough to actually wake people up. They're going to want to tie you up in melee. You cannot melee with these things. They are awful. However, they do have tank shock. As a desperation move, still a thing.
It is. And it is weird that each of the variants have their own like positives and negatives for being a Distraction Carnifex. But I feel like the Crusader is probably the best for being a Distraction Carnifex.
Look, the Redeemer is the best of the 3. There's a reason they jacked it up to 285. That said, it's not a Distraction Carnifex with how it gets used. It actually fucks.
There are obviously cases that it could do that job, but I don't think that that's the primary goal when you put it in a list. Whereas you can have that as the realistic expectation when you're playing a Crusader. It can do the transport thing, and once it's done with that, just be a distraction.
We could end on that. However, I can already hear how angry Space Marine players are that we didn't pick their perfect Distraction Carnifex. So let's show the Brutalis Dreadnought.
Fine. I feel like we've already done the Dreadnoughts.
Dreadnoughts just work, but Space Marine players are a little slow. We gotta give them their exact example.
The Brutalis Dreadnought is a great example. It's 8-inch move, T10, 2-up save, 12 wounds. It has enough guns to be annoying.
Just barely. It's a lot of tickle guns.
But like, honestly, I don't want to say I prefer tickle guns over real scary weapons, but it lets you be at 160 points as opposed to having like real cannons and being 250.
True. You get a pair of multi-meltas. They're not super long range, but again, if we're jamming up board, it's not that big of a deal. It's just enough to be a little bit scary and make them want to get you to go away. You absolutely wreck in melee. You have everything a Distraction Carnifex could want. You're 160 points. There is nothing wrong with this as a Distraction Carnifex.
It does also look like it's menacing, right? Like it's one of those like, yeah, it seems like it's kind of scary. I should deal with it.
Yeah, it's almost like it's sized for modern Warhammer and not the original Carnifex, which is very small.
Yeah, no, the Brutalis has an intimidating presence, so...
It has an intimidating aura.
I mean, it's just standing there looking menacing. Yeah, the Brutalis Dreadnought is just a great Distraction Carnifex.
So there we go. We've got a lot of practice in identifying Distraction Carnifexes. Now you could go in the comments and recommend your favorite Distraction Carnifex, should you so choose. And while you're down there, make sure you do the other YouTube pleasantries if you could. It'd really help.
I'm looking forward to seeing what people decide on for the Custodies. What's your Distraction Carnifex?
One Custodian. 230 points.
Yep. If it's just under, good enough.
All right, that does it for this episode then. We are out of here.
Sounds good.